Are first and third from the right and behind Lou's hair. I was well out of film by this point. July 29th. After work, I took the train up to Westchester on the way to the 2018 Lang family reunion. Slept in my little brother's room. This was my last night in my childhood home. Woke up early. I shared a room with my older brother from birth. He had bad asthma. The idea was that if he had an attack in the night, I would wake up my parents by crying and they would get him to the hospital. When my little brother was born, he went straight into his own room. He had a closet. We had an air conditioner. When he was around 12, my older brother decided he didn't want to share anymore, and my parents tried to switch him with my little brother who was too young for it. He cried for hours, saying, "I want to sleep in my own little bed." Eventually I went and woke up my parents and they put an end to the experiment. I'm a middle child. One cannot imagine a scenario in this world or any other in which I would have wound up with my own space. Once it was light, I got up and stood to my final chore in the house where I approached maturity. A shadow fell across my childhood bed. It was the shadow of doom, the shadow of its assassin, my shadow. We piled into my parents' sea green Prius and set off toward Lake Luzerne in the Adirondack Mountains for the 2018 Lang family reunion. 3 days of good food and bad tempers. Crossing the span of the new Tappan Zee Bridge, I spied this strapping gentleman taking his hog for a spin. Traffic was bumper to bumper and we rode alongside one another for a while. I watched him get out a cigarette. It took him 5 tries to get it lit. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. We arrived. My aunt and cousins arrived. My brother and his wife arrived. My other aunt, my uncle, and his wife were already there. We got my grandmother out of the black plastic box from the crematorium and trekked down the hill to the spot on the lawn where the old house, where their generation and mine spent their earliest summers, used to be. My mother and aunts and uncle tore it down about 10 years ago and built the new one up on the hill, winterized. My Aunt Elaine carried the bag with my grandmother in it a little way off the lawn toward the spot where they had scattered my grandfather's ashes 20 years ago. This responsibility fell to Elaine because she was wearing closed-toed shoes and there was poison ivy all around. The back door of the old house was mere feet from where we were gathered. A little farther than that, the front porch, where, when I was very small, my grandmother held me in her lap during a storm and rocked me in her wicker chair and we watched the lumber trucks, heavy with cut logs, roared down Route 9N as lightning blazed and thunder crashed all around us. Writing this, I remember it more clearly than I have in years. July 21st, the next day. Signed up for a family hike to see the grandmother tree, a 335-year-old white pine. Plans for the outing got rearranged. People who had never planned on going in the first place announced it publicly for the first time. Confusion abounded. Feelings got hurt. The words were spake in anger. All I know is somebody had better go and look at that fucking tree. The tree was very nice. December 26th. Walked 7 miles to Manhattan to make potato latkes for my mother and my injured aunt. Got stuck for half an hour on a drawbridge. December 31st. Returned my injured aunt's modem and router to RCN's Midtown office for her. Then got myself dolled up and left two New Year's Eve parties with my friend Kate. You know someone's a true pal when they will bail with you twice in one night. We watched the Great British Bake Off and made plans to go to Coney Island on New Year's Day, she to do a polar bear swim and me to drop acid. January 1st. Got a text saying that there was no room for me in the car. I was going to have to trip solo. Decided that Gowanus would be the most apocalyptic place for it. The following is a summary of what came next in 2 acts. Act 1. I eat soup while waiting for the drugs to kick in. I steal a handful of paper towels from the restaurant bathroom because I might need them for something. I don't need them for anything. The sun casts spooky shadows. I notice how spooky the trees are. The wind picks up. A black cat crosses my path. Everything starts to look real spooky. I become a wizard. I become transfixed. The word sclerotic begins to repeat over and over in my mind. I take a picture I decide to call Self-Portrait with Self. I take a picture I decide to call Self-Portrait with Verizon. I take a picture I decide to call Verizon with 3 people arguing about a cat. Jeff Bezos pile drives me and pins me to the fucking pavement. I take a series of pictures I decide to call Drawbridge with Mayonnaise Hand. They threaten to take away my artistic license. I had this thought while I was tripping and I didn't realize it was a pun until after. But it's kind of reassuring to know that that still works, like that's the base level of conscious functioning. I take a picture while thinking, I'm not worthy of this complexity. I make a mental note to look up sclerotic. Meatloaf comes out of the radio and saves me. I return home to eat apples and drink tea. Act 2. I take a bath. I experiment with cheese. I cry a little. I experiment with alcohol. I experiment with saying awful things to myself. I decide to walk to Manhattan. I decide to sing in the apartment before I leave. I realize that in the previous hours I regressed to an infantile state, learned to clothe and feed myself, anointed myself with a maternal dose of shame, and christened myself in song. In short, that I have rebirthed myself, that I should begin it again in the new year. I stop in the middle of Tillery Street to write this revelation down, and make a mental note to revisit the aforementioned revelation again once sober. I return to normal time and become part of the sequence of events once again. January 2nd, the next day, I photograph a stapler. And that brings us up to the present. Does anyone have any questions? Not even one little question?
I do, Sam. What's your earliest memory?
I fell down the stairs at the Baronot's house. They had a long driveway going up, and the entrance was on the basement level. To get to the rest of the house, it wasn't a spiral staircase, but it had 3 or 4 corners, and it went around and around. And I'd never heard of falling downstairs before, and I didn't know what was happening, but it just kept happening and happening and happening. I hear from my mother that I was less than 1. I've got lots of copies out front. Come see me after. Thank you so much. And thank you to Jane for hosting this.